Welcome to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune. Henry Chop reporting, Friday, January 31st, 1941. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:04 a.m. It will set at 5:03 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, fair to partly cloudy on Friday. Saturday, partly cloudy and warmer. Gentle to moderate westerly winds, diminishing and becoming variable Friday afternoon. The low temperature, 28 degrees. The high temperature, 37. Today's headline, reveal lack of air defense. Washington, D.C., January 30th. Members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee were startled today by testimony concerning the deplorable state of the nation's air defenses, which was elicited from Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson. Stimson's evidence was given at a secret session of the committee after he had pleaded not to be asked questions concerning the Army's air strength at an open hearing. Under close questioning, the Secretary of War confessed that not a single combat plane in the Army fulfilled all the requirements of modern air fighting in Europe. There is no Army plane, he admitted, which is equipped with high gun power and armored protection for the pilot, considered essential to present-day air combat. Not one plane in the Army has even the first of the modern requirements for fighting planes, self-sealing gasoline tanks, Stimson admitted. The United States Army could not put into the air a single plane which could cope on equal terms with the thousands of planes battling each other in Europe, he disclosed. Of approximately 2,800 combat planes produced in the United States last year, Stimson said, about 400 were kept in this country for the Army and Navy. The remainder were shipped abroad, the great proportion to Britain. None of these planes was modern in the European sense. Production of planes of all types, pursuit ships, bombers, trainers, totaled close to 5,900 planes, Stimson said. Despite frequent urgings by senators, he refused to present a breakdown of this figure, revealing how many were trainers, how many were bombers, and how many were pursuit planes. He insisted he could not get the figure separating various classes of planes. And now for world news. Cairo, Egypt, January 30th. British mechanized units leading the victorious advance into Libya struck out for Benghazi today after the occupation of Derna, the third major Italian bastion fall. The activity of this advance army on wheels in the direction of Benghazi, which is 150 miles beyond Derna and 325 miles west of the Egyptian border, suggested that British troops soon would be striking there in force. Authoritative reports received by British sources indicated that the Italians were preparing to make a stand between Derna and Benghazi. Some of the forces defending Derna were believed to have been able toward the end to withdraw westward, but of this there it was no positive confirmation. Occupation of Derna followed 4 days of the bitterest resistance the British have encountered in all of their African campaign. Fewer than 10,000 Italians were left to defend the town, but British sources disclosed they fought with a violence not shown before. The battle for Derna was in no stereotyped pattern as previous British victories had been. The town was never wholly surrounded, and from the first day of the general attack, when British armored forces racing from Tobruk had reached Derna's outskirts, the Italians strongly resisted. The initial class of tanks went in British favor, but the Italians retired behind ridges outside the town and continuously and heavily shelled the British main forces massing outside. These artillery duels were followed by 2 days of heavy ground fighting. Military sources saying that the Italians had shown pluck remarked that they fully expected further resistance before the British could get to Benghazi. Athens, January 30th. Greek warriors on the offensive again after beating off a week of fierce Italian counterattacks tonight were reported to have wrested new positions from the fascists in the rugged Albanian mountains north of Klissura. Military advices said the Greeks pausing only long enough to pledge themselves to a fight unto death at brief frontline memorial services for their late leader, Premier General John Metexis, lashed out with such fury that the Italians were forced to abandon their own counterthrusts and withdraw hastily to new positions. A government spokesman said the four most recent Italian counterattacks were crushed by withering artillery and automatic rifle fire. At one point where the Italians attempted to penetrate the Greek line, he said the fascists left behind their dead, wounded, and many prisoners, and much war equipment. In 2 days, the Greeks have taken 200 prisoners, he declared. Rome, January 30th. Capture of Greek prisoners and arms by Italian troops in sharp patrol actions on the Albanian front was reported today by the Italian High Command. Rome, January 30th. A united offensive against Britain, which will make previous operations resemble only preliminary episodes, was predicted by fascist editorial spokesman tonight as the High Command reported victories by Italian troops counterattacking in Eritrea. Giovanni Ansaldo, editor of Foreign Minister Concalazio Ciano's newspaper Telefrafo in Leghorn, told the armed forces that Premier Mussolini and Adolf Hitler would make the decision soon for the attacks against the British. Speaking over the radio shortly before Hitler's promise of an Axis victory in 1941 was rebroadcast in Italy, Ansaldo indicated the new offensive would be timed to render the United States' help to Britain futile. Bucharest, Romania, January 30th, passed by military censor. More than 2,000 leaders of last week's rebellion in Romania, including 52 gunwomen, have been arrested in Bucharest alone, it was announced officially today. The announcement said also that 32,635 machine guns, rifles, revolvers, and hand grenades, and nearly 400,000 rounds of ammunition had been seized. An Interior Ministry communique said pamphlets seized in one Iron Guard headquarters proved the rebellion was based on communistic terroristic principles. Oscar Kaufman, Romanian banker who has fled to London, was placed on trial in absentia, accused of unlawfully exporting $97,000 of United States money. Berlin, January 30th. Any ship carrying aid to England that comes within the range of German U-boats will be torpedoed, Adolf Hitler declared today in a speech marking the 8th anniversary of his accession to power in Germany. Hitler, addressing 18,000 Nazi Party men in the Berlin Sports Palace, asserted, "Whoever believes he can help England must at all events know one thing. Every ship with or without convoy that comes within range of our torpedo tubes will be torpedoed. We are engaged in a war which we did not desire. When, however, others are looking for a fight and aim at extirpating the German nation, then they are in for a terrific surprise." Hitler, wearing the field gray tunic he had on the morning of September 1st, 1939, the day the war started, promised Germany victory within the year. Referring to American aid for England, Hitler said, "I can only say this. We have from the beginning put every possibility into our calculations. That the German people have no quarrel with the American people is clear to everybody who doesn't want consciously to twist the facts and claim its opposite. Never yet has Germany sponsored interests on the American continent except that it helped to fight for the liberty of this continent. If the states of this continent, however, now attempt possibly to interfere with the European conflict, then the war aims will change even faster. Then all Europe will rise in its own defense. Concerning Hitler's threat to shipping, the Associated Press said, the most authoritative interpretation in Berlin was that the United States need not be concerned so long as American ships remained outside British waters. In London, the British Broadcasting Corporation, commenting upon the speech, said, the free peoples of Britain and America will fight this war to the bitter end to force the German people to throw off the Nazis. New York, January 30th. The 4,868-ton British freighter Scaife Crown radioed at 9 p.m. Chicago time tonight that it had sighted a suspicious submarine approximately 60 miles east of St. John's, Newfoundland. The position was given as 47.52 north latitude, 50.34 west longitude. The freighter's call was the first indication that Axis submarines might be operating in this area at the northern end of the Grand Banks and outside the Pan-American Neutrality Belt. St. John's is the site of one of the naval bases leased by the United States from the British. Troops and supplies were aboard the United States Army transport Edmund B. Alexander, which anchored in St. John's Harbor yesterday. London, January 30th. The sinking of the British Navy trawler Pelton was reported tonight. Shanghai, January 31st. Japanese dispatches from Saigon, French Indochina, said an armistice agreement ending hostilities between Thailand and French Indochina was signed at noon, 12 a.m. Chicago time today, aboard the Japanese cruiser Natori. Terms of the armistice were not disclosed. Border fighting between Thailand and French Indochina had been going on sporadically since last November. London, January 30th. Wendell L. Willkie, who came here from America to study England's defense against the German Blitzkrieg, today visited the secret map room of the British Admiralty. He toured the offices with A.V. Alexander, First Lord of the Admiralty. Earlier, Willkie had rubbed elbows with Britain's man in the street when he visited a London pub where he drank and praised 3 kinds of English beer and a glass of champagne, which the owner opened in celebration of his visit. At the pub, he played a game of darts with a laborer and lost. My opponent was too good. Also, he knew the rules, and there's something to that, Willkie said. On a visit to another pub, the proprietor invited Willkie to come behind the bar, from where Willkie served beer to a group of soldiers in the place who recognized him. Willkie got a first-hand view of the British rationing system and its check on aliens when he visited a police station to register as a visiting alien and to obtain an identification card and ration coupons. He also conferred on British legal procedure with Lord Chancellor Sir John Simon. His contacts with British leaders were continued at a cocktail party, which included Lord Stamp, Britain's chief economic advisor. London, January 30th. Harry Hopkins, President Roosevelt's personal envoy, had an audience today with King George VI of Great Britain and remained at Buckingham Palace for lunch with the King and Queen Elizabeth. London, January 30th. An effort to organize Irishmen in Britain who oppose Ireland's neutrality is being made here. Under the leadership of Robert Saunders, former Deputy Lieutenant of the County of Cork, a meeting has been called for February 21st in London to decide on a form of organization. Saunders said hundreds of potential members from all classes, including soldiers, sailors, airmen, have written letters pledging their support. Many of them expressed a feeling of shame that because they are Irish, they should be looked upon in Britain as not being in full support of the war effort, he said. London, January 30th. A campaign to induce the British government to issue an unequivocal statement of its peace aims came to a head in the House of Commons tonight. Geoffrey Mander, a Liberal, introduced a motion for early discussion which declared that effective propagation of the Allied peace aims throughout the world would be a powerful weapon in assisting to win the war. Both in the press and Parliament, protests recently were voiced at the British government's reluctance to state its specific war aims. Mander's action, however, cut right across the government's repeated refusal to comply with these demands. Mander's motion proposes that the aims should include the restoration of freedom to all peoples overrun by Nazi and fascist aggression in recent years, provision for food for the continental nations immediately after the enemy's arms are put down and the occupied territory evacuated, no negotiation with the present regimes in Germany and Italy, opportunities for the German and Italian peoples to choose for themselves whatever form of self-government they think is fit, the setting up of a war organization possessing such a military force as to prevent further acts of aggression with suitable machinery for a peaceful settlement of international disputes through conciliation or a third-party judgment, and for promotion of economic unity of the world and development of its resources for the benefit of all. Paris, January 26th, by Courier de Berlin, delayed. After 48 hours of reflection, Paris editorialists gave a mixed reception today to the new National Council, in which 188 Frenchmen, ranging from a blacksmith to an academician, are assembled in a consultative body recalling Napoleon's 50-man Council of State. The only newspaper that gave the assembly unqualified approval was Le Courrier du Peuple, whose publisher, Jacques Deroit, is one of the appointees to the new council. Deroit's paper said the creation of the National Council is evidence of Marshal Pétain's desire to surround himself with competent men of the country's economic and political spheres in order to come into closer contact with the real country. At the other extreme is Charles Dieudonné, who, writing in La France au Travail under the sarcastic title France is Saved, said, France has merely gained an additional parliament composed of doctors who will probably put casts on wooden legs and prescribe sleeping powders instead of trying radical remedies. Vichy, France, January 30th. Marshal Pétain's apparent desire to emphasize France's economic collaboration with Germany has resulted in an agreement under which the two nations will split the market for cigarette papers. Before the war, France controlled 2/3 of the world market in cigarette paper. The Germans later won a strong foothold. Now each has agreed that Germany will have the monopoly in all countries east of the Reich and that France can do its selling in the markets of Western Europe. London, January 30th. Fire lookout service is compulsory for practically all business premises and factories in Britain, and a vast volunteer force has been formed to guard domestic buildings against incendiary bombs, but it was disclosed today many thousands of watchers are not equipped with steel hats for their nightly vigils, during which cascading shrapnel is a common danger. Minister of Home Security Herbert Morrison told the House of Commons the government is acting to relieve this shortage. London, January 30th. Following complaints against soaring fish prices, the Food Ministry is said to be considering applying official control of marketing, wholesale, and retail costs. In Brixham today, whiting sold at about $4 for 14 pounds. Other fish also are said to be beyond the purses of the working class families who require fish to supplement their rationed foods. London, January 30th. Accompanied by 8 women members of Parliament, a deputation of 40 women representing 2 million workers called on Minister of Pensions Sir Walter Womersley and Captain Harry Cruikshank, Financial Secretary of the Treasury, today, demanding a revision of the government war injuries compensation scheme. The deputation claimed equal pay for equal danger and protested against the existing system under which single men receive about $7 weekly compensation against about $5.60 for women. Dr. Edith Summerskill, a Labourite who introduced the deputation, said the government was urging women to come right into the firing line, therefore they were entitled to equal benefits with men in case of injury. Womersley and Cruikshank promised that the women's claim will be submitted to the War Cabinet. San Jose, Costa Rica, January 30th. Mail matter described as Nazi propaganda was banned today by the Costa Rican Postal Department on the grounds that it was offensive to a friendly nation, Great Britain, over the protest of Felix Tripolori, German charge d'affaires. Tijuana, Mexico, January 30th. The fire today at Le Chic perfume shop on Revolution Avenue had everything. Exploding perfume containers made quite a racket. It sounded like the 4th of July, said one hombre. And the smell, oh senor, she was wonderful. But the owner said that the spectacle cost several $1,000s. And now back to national news. Washington, D.C., January 30th. The House today received the Roosevelt dictatorship bill with 4 committee-approved amendments, which were immediately branded by Republican Minority Leader Joseph W. Martin Jr. as window dressing, which attempts to mask the imperialistic nature of the measure. 14 Democratic and 3 Republican members of the Foreign Affairs Committee voted to report the bill in its amended form, while 1 Democrat and 7 Republicans voted against sending it to the floor. The committee rejected a proposal by Representative Hamilton Fish, Republican New York, to place a $2 billion limit on the aid, which may be extended to Great Britain, Greece, and China by the president. Washington, D.C., January 30th. Legislation authorizing a $300 million expenditure to increase the Navy's protection against air attack was signed today by President Roosevelt. It was the first bill passed at this session of Congress. Under its terms, the Navy is authorized to install anti-aircraft guns and armor on 58 combat ships and 103 auxiliary craft already in service. The additional defenses were requested by the Navy as a result of lessons learned from the war in Europe. Rear Admiral S.M. Robinson, chief of the Navy Bureau of Ships, had testified before a congressional committee that with the new installations, you can be sure that our ships will be a little better than the other fellows if we get into any sort of mix-up. Washington, D.C., January 30th. While official Washington was reading Adolf Hitler's boast that he is well prepared to overwhelm Great Britain, it transpired that General George C. Marshall, Chief of Staff of the Army, told the House Foreign Affairs Committee in secret session that Germany has 4 times as many combat planes as the British have. Hitler's threat to torpedo American ships convoying aid to Britain caused a varied reaction in Congress. Some legislators retorted that America would not be swayed by threats, while others commented that Hitler's warning should not be needed to impress Americans with the risk of becoming involved in the war. Washington, D.C., January 30th. In an action believed to set a precedent, the War Department today rejected a bid from the Ford Motor Company for a contract involving 11,781 half-ton trucks because it said the company made exception as to labor clauses. The Ford Company submitted the lowest bid of the 155 firms which sought the contract, but the award was made to the Fargo Motor Corporation of Detroit. The bid of the Fargo Corporation was $10,298,128. The Ford Company's figure was not disclosed tonight. Last month, it was announced that all work done under defense contracts should be in compliance with federal statutes such as the Wagner Act, the Walsh-Healy Act setting labor standards for government contractors, and the Wage Hour Act. It was not disclosed just what part of the labor clauses Ford considered objectionable. Omaha, Nebraska, January 30th. What to do about Wendell Willkie and his current flirtations with the Roosevelt administration on the dictator bill will be the top subject when Republican leaders from at least 14 states gather here on Saturday. The meeting was advertised as a routine gathering to plan party organization and financing, but it was admitted today the discussion will center on Willkie. 13 state chairmen have accepted invitations to the meeting, including Ben L. Burr of Illinois. Other states to be represented are Texas, Wisconsin, North and South Dakota, Iowa, Utah, Kansas, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Indiana, and Nebraska. Robert McIlvaine of Wisconsin will attend as personal representative of National Chairman Joe Martin. Bob Rennick, Chicago, and Charles Hawks and James Murphy of Madison, Wisconsin also will be present. Washington, D.C., January 30th. Opposition to plans of the New Deal administration to set up regional power authorities in various parts of the United States, particularly the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Waterway Project, has been expressed in a report of the Committee on Natural Resources Production of the United States Chamber of Commerce. It was learned today. The report will be submitted to the membership of the organization at the annual meeting to be held here in May. It is obvious that the St. Lawrence Power Project cannot be justified either in Canada or in the United States for electric power for defense industries, the report states. The growing needs of defense industries in the St. Lawrence region, as elsewhere, are of first importance, and they must be met by expansion programs other than the St. Lawrence development now proposed. Washington, D.C., January 30th. Representative Paul W. Schaefer, Republican Michigan, today asked Chairman Martin Dies of the Committee Investigating Un-American Activities to investigate the Farmers Yearbook put out by the Department of Agriculture for distribution to farmers by members of Congress. On the House floor, he described the book as one of the slimmest pieces of communistic propaganda ever printed by the New Deal. The entire tenor of the book is decidedly socialistic, Schaefer declared in a letter to Dies suggesting a formal inquiry. I am of the opinion that the writers who contributed to it should be called before the committee to explain. Washington, D.C., January 30th. With autograph seekers having a field day, screen stars and notables in the Capitol tonight participated in observance of the president's 59th birthday designed to aid his fellow infantile paralysis sufferers. Half an hour before midnight, the president went on the air and thanked the nation for making his birthday a happy one by contributing to the Paralysis Fund. The Hollywood figures who began arriving yesterday were greeted at the airport and railroad station by swarms of fans waving autograph books and fountain pens. San Diego, California, January 30th. 30 United States sailors took over certain activities at the Martinowich Boat Company today after a labor dispute halted work on 5 boats for the Navy. The Navy working party was supplemented by caretaker crews of 3 tuna boats being converted into minesweepers. The men concentrated on fitting out 1 sweeper scheduled to start trial runs. 2 new minesweepers also are building at the plant. Tony Martinowich, the company manager, termed the labor dispute a strike and said it had been called by the San Diego Building and Construction Trades Council in an effort to obtain a closed shop. Neither the Navy nor the union commented. Dayton, Ohio, January 30th. Michael J. Grosseto, a federal mediator, announced tonight settlement of a strike of building craft employees that tied up work on a $1,550,000 expansion program at the Wright Field Testing Laboratory for the Army Air Corps. Grosseto said the War Department ordered Colonel Lester T. Miller, commandant of the field, to suspend pending further investigation, an electrical project being handled by the Penner Installation Company of New York. Between 400 and 500 members of the AFL building trades unions left their jobs yesterday because, a spokesman said, the Penner Company imported 4 men affiliated with a CIO union. Grosseto said the AFL men would return to work tomorrow. Fort Stanton, New Mexico, January 30th. Captain William Dayney of the scuttled German liner Columbus and 37 of his crew were brought today to an internment camp in the southern New Mexico mountains. I will remain with my men except for one trip to bring the rest of them in 2 or 3 weeks, Captain Dayney said. The rest of the Columbus crew of more than 400 is at Angle Island in San Francisco Bay, where they were held after destroying their ship in the South Atlantic to evade capture by the British in December 1939. Hattiesburg, Mississippi, January 30th. Despite a 4-phase investigation, mystery still cloaked tonight the cause of the troop train wreck at nearby Sandersville yesterday, in which 19 Indiana National Guardsmen were injured and a railroad fireman was killed. Exhaustive inquiries were being made by federal, state, military, and railroad officials, but none would comment concerning anything their search might have revealed to show why the engine in eight of special trains, 12 cars plunged off the Southern Railway track and overturned. Federal Bureau of Investigation agents had charge of the federal phase of the case, 3 FBI men having visited the scene of the wreck. An Army Board of Inquiry was meeting at Camp Shelby, to which the Indiana troops were being brought for training. Barranquilla, Colombia, January 30th. The United States destroyer Simmons and the submarine Triton, the latter on her maiden voyage, arrived here today. Jefferson City, Missouri, January 30th. More than 300 men and women from St. Louis and other cities charged into the Missouri House of Representatives this afternoon and shouted demands that the legislature, preponderantly Democratic, seat Forrest C. Donnell, Republican, as governor. For more than 25 minutes, the huge hall was a bedlam as the demonstrators on one side and Democratic legislators and the galleries filled with Democratic office workers and friends booed, whistled, and called names. The demonstration was in protest against the refusal of the Democratic legislature to seat Donnell, victor over his Democratic opponent, Lawrence McDaniel, Democrat, in the November election. Donnell won by 3,613 votes, according to official returns. The legislature acted against Donnell on complaint of Democratic bosses that Donnell received many fraudulent votes. As a result, Lloyd C. Stark is continuing as governor. However, he has condemned the Democratic barrier against Donnell as unfair. The House was in session as the demonstrators arrived. The sergeant locked the chamber doors against them. Some of the legislators appeared worried. A.P. Loff, Democratic Majority Leader, hastily forced an adjournment until morning. Bridgeport, Connecticut, January 30th. State's Attorney Lauren Willis today staked the reputation of Mrs. John K. Strubing, Jr., Greenwich Society matron, against a possible 30 years in prison for the colored servant charged with raping her 4 times. The case will go to jury tomorrow. Summing up the state's evidence at the conclusion of the 6-day trial of Joseph Spell, the prosecutor demanded conviction for Mrs. Strubing's former houseman chauffeur as the price of her freedom from social ostracism. Willis ridiculed Spell's testimony that Mrs. Strubing lured him on and quickly surrendered to his embraces when he interrupted her bath and demanded money. Willis told the 6 men and 6 women jurors, if they acquitted Spell, you will brand this lady as a woman unfit to associate with decent people. Are you going to send her forth as an outcast forever? Mrs. Strubing was not in court, but her husband, New York advertising man and former Princeton football star, sat on a front seat. Montgomery, Alabama, January 30th. 2 men sentenced to die in the electric chair for murder between midnight and dawn tomorrow received stays of execution tonight, one through court action and the other through executive reprieve. Joe Vernon, Birmingham Negro, through his attorney in Washington, D.C., obtained a stay of execution from Associate Justice Felix Frankfurter until the Negro's counsel could file a motion for a review of the case by the United States Supreme Court. After the clerk of the United States Supreme Court had advised Attorney General Thomas S. Lawson of the stay, Governor Frank M. Dixon reprieved Elsie Bell, convicted with Vernon for slaying Bernie Montgomery, filling station attendant, in a holdup. Earlier, the Alabama Supreme Court has sustained a lower court's action in denying Vernon's plea for a writ of habeas corpus. The plea contended Vernon had been denied his constitutional rights because Negroes were intentionally and systematically barred from juries. New York, January 30th. George Scalise, convict, pander, and former president of the Building Service Employees Union, AFL, today was sentenced to 3.5 years more in prison, this time by federal Judge Mortimer Byers in Brooklyn for income tax evasion. Scalise was charged with defrauding the government of approximately $103,000 for 1937, 38, and 1939, and pleaded guilty on the charge affecting 1937. The sentence must be served after Scalise completes a 10 to 20-year sentence imposed in Manhattan a few months ago after conviction by District Attorney Thomas E. Dewey of grand larceny of funds of his union. Leo J. Healy, Scalise's attorney, told the court that his client was financially irresponsible and could not pay the taxes due the government. Judge Byers told Scalise he would have imposed a maximum prison term of 5 years on each of the 3 counts had Scalise been tried and convicted instead of pleading guilty to the federal judge. Judge Byers dismissed the other 2 counts. New York, January 30th. The construction of double-decked elevated highways was recommended for typical large cities in a committee report to the 38th Annual Convention of the American Road Builders Association here today. Attached to the report was an engineering study of the proposal as prepared by Ralph R. Loeffler, a design engineer for the Chicago Sanitary District. As an example of the application of this recommendation, the study includes a double-decked elevated highway system superimposed upon a map of Chicago. The Loeffler structure consists of 2 pavement decks, both above the ground level or normal street level. The upper deck would provide 3 traffic lanes and the lower deck would provide 2 lanes. All 5 lanes would move in the same direction. For traffic in the opposite direction, a separate structure would be provided either in a separate street or with an interval for light and air on a wide right-of-way. And now for local and regional news. Brigadier General Thomas S. Hammond, chairman of the Chicago chapter of the America First Committee, said last night that he believed passage of the War Dictatorship Bill would be the command for America to march along the road that is lined with hospitals, cemeteries, and staggering debt. He spoke to an enthusiastic audience at a labor rally in Carmen's Hall, 328 South Ashland Avenue. At the same time, Mrs. A. Carpenter, chairman of the Downstate Division of the Chicago chapter of America First, announced that organization of 11 new chapters and brought to 30 the total of state units. New chapters are located in DeKalb, Lockport, Rockford, Libertyville, Palos Park, River Forest, Cicero, Glen Ellen, Fox Lake, Moline, and Harvey. I do not believe that there are many competent military or naval observers in the United States who think for 1 minute that the United States is in any danger whatever of invasion by the Axis powers, General Hammond told his audience at the labor meeting. I say that if we build for defense, if we establish the defense bases long overdue, and do not throw our Army, our Navy, our Air Force, and all our facilities of production into other people's wars, we will thus serve America best. If you feel as I do, then you should, each and every one of you, call upon your congressmen in Washington, both in the House and in the Senate, to vote against that bill, the dictator bill, in any form, whether before or after it has had its face lifted. Facelifting is not enough. Sink it. The United States should not allow Britain's lack of dollar exchange to halt the flow of war supplies to Britain, Frank Knox, Secretary of the Navy, said yesterday. He spoke before the State Street Council at a luncheon in the Palmer House. Britain occupies the firing line where men and women as well as the soldiers share the dangers of the battlefield, Knox said. On the other hand, we play the part of munitions makers in this critical contest. Under such circumstances, we can afford to be generous to a fault. We cannot haggle or trade on whatever. We should lend our aid to the British, Greeks, and Chinese. Our hope of escaping involvement in this war is to become so strong on land, sea, and in the air that aggressor nations will be afraid to attack us. While making ourselves strong, should we not give every aid to nations holding the line? Secretary Knox declared that the British Navy is a line of defense for America in the Atlantic. Our Western world has been safe from attack, he said, because of the sea control of the British Navy and the British support of the Monroe Doctrine. That has made the Atlantic safe for us. Now, Germany is attempting to seize control of sea power from Britain. Efforts to settle a strike called by the Farm Equipment Workers Organizing Committee, CIO, at the tractor works of the International Harvester Company will be taken up at a conference of union leaders and company executives on Monday, it was indicated yesterday. The strike, which began Wednesday, has made idle 6,500 employees of the company, which has several $million worth of defense contracts. Picket lines are being maintained about the plant, but no attempt to operate was made yesterday. The union has demanded wage increases, elimination of piecework, and recognition of the FEWOC as bargaining agent for all company plants. In some plants, the recognized agencies now are independent unions. Abe Baldy, president of the McCormick Works Independent Union, and Charles J. Willett of the West Pullman Group said they had overwhelming majorities over the FEWOC and would continue to work under their contracts with the company. Donald M. Nelson, Director of Purchases for the National Defense Commission, asserted last night that the nation's defense requirements must be met before civilian demands are satisfied. He warned further that more defense purchases must be made in the Middle West to avoid making the area an economic desert. Nelson, who left his position of Executive Vice President of Sears Roebuck and Company to take a key job in defense work, spoke at the annual dinner of the Chicago Association of Commerce in the Stevens Hotel. Another speaker was David Sarnoff, president of the Radio Corporation of America, who forecast industrial developments of the future. Mayor Kelly and hundreds of business leaders were present. Officials of the Illinois Manufacturers Association will attend a special meeting today to lay plans for obtaining naval shipbuilding contracts, thus tapping a new reservoir of business estimated to bring millions of dollars to the Chicago area annually and provide work for hundreds of men. James L. Donnelly, Executive Vice President of the organization, called the session yesterday after receiving a telegram from Senator C. Waylon Brooks, Republican Illinois, assuring that prospects were good for Illinois companies and urging united action to obtain contracts. Brooks based his message on large appropriation bills just passed or pending before the Senate. A $909 million measure approved Wednesday authorizes the expansion of naval construction facilities and the building of 400 small craft for the Navy. A suggestion that labor engaged in national defense production be prevented by government from striking until a committee of citizens had passed on points at issue was made yesterday by W. H. Spencer, Dean of the University of Chicago School of Business. Addressing 800 members of the Illinois Federation of Women's Clubs in the Hotel Sherman, Spencer suggested that a committee of distinguished citizens be appointed by the president. In view of what the government has done to protect the workers in their right to organize and engage in collective bargaining, the government would be justified in requiring labor to postpone the right to strike until all other methods of settling disputes had failed, Spencer said. The right to strike is not nearly so important to workers as it once was. Labor has achieved great social gains, and the government is not likely to tamper with them if labor gives substantially full support to the defense program. A call for 3,218 recruits needed to bring regiments of the 33rd Division Illinois National Guard up to their authorized strength before the division is inducted into federal service on March 5th was issued yesterday by Major General Samuel T. Lawton, Division Commander. The division has been ordered by the War Department to recruit up to a peacetime strength of 13,268 enlisted men and 670 officers. Present strength is 10,082 men and 638 officers. General Lawton stressed the immediate need for new recruits, explaining that the March 5th induction date is the deadline after which no more men may be accepted. He said that enlistments with the division should prove especially appealing to young men facing military service under the draft law. A detachment of 80 sailors from the Great Lakes Naval Training Station will leave tomorrow for the Ford Service School at the Ford Motor Company's plant in Dearborn, Michigan, a Navy officer said yesterday. A second group of 180 men will be sent to the school on February 15th. Sailors detailed to the Ford School have received a month of preliminary training at Great Lakes in mathematics, shop theory, metalworking, and related subjects. At the Ford School, they will receive 3 months of intensive instruction in electricity, boiler making, molding, metalwork, carpentry, pattern making, and ship fitting. The school, which can accommodate 1,200 sailors, is expected to be operating at capacity by summer. Salem, Illinois, January 30th. Philip Howard Leckrone of Salem, age 28, a pilot in the British Royal Air Force who was killed in England January 5th, died in a collision of aircraft. His widow, Naomi, was advised by the British Air Ministry yesterday. Leckrone was buried with full military honors. Selective Service officials announced yesterday that henceforth the offices of Cook County's 180 local draft boards will be open daily from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. instead of 9 to 6 and will remain open only 2 evenings each week, Mondays and Fridays instead of 3 as in the past. The evening hours will be 6 to 9 p.m. 10,000 persons are attending vocational classes in 30 Illinois high schools, learning new trades or renewing old ones as part of the $15 million National Defense Training Program. Many enrollees chosen from WPA roles and the Illinois State Employment Service go to pre-employment school 6 hours a day, 5 days a week to supply skilled and semi-skilled workers to provide industry to private industry. Others already employed attend evening schools to increase their skills. The classes are sponsored by local boards of education with funds provided by the federal government. Regular school instructors, supplemented by experts from private industry, teach welding, aviation, and automobile mechanics, foundry work, and metal and woodworking. Federal inspectors supervise the courses to see that industries most in need of a certain type of skilled or semi-skilled labor are supplied speedily. Since the start of the VAST program last summer, approximately 20,000 persons have been trained for defense industry, according to C.A. Bell, State Director of Vocational Education. Half of these were skilled and semi-skilled employed workers who were taught jobs requiring greater skills. The rest were unemployed. 7,000 of the latter group have been placed with private defense industries, Bell said. St. Louis, Missouri, January 30th. American agriculture is in a position to assure the nation a supply of farm products ample to meet any emergency. This assurance was made to more than 4,000 Illinois farm leaders who jammed the municipal auditorium today to hear Earl C. Smith, president, open the 25th anniversary convention of the Illinois Agriculture Association. The fact that the farmer is far better prepared to meet demands than skilled labor is, Smith said, a direct denial of the charge that American farmers have been participating in economy of scarcity. However, he added, bureaucratic influences, partisanship, and traditional government stubbornness has lessened the effectiveness of farm laws, and they must be overcome if agriculture is to produce properly. Springfield, Illinois, January 30th. Former Judge Edwin L. Slot Machine Wilson of Joliet, whose court protection of one-armed bandits played a part in his defeat for re-election to the circuit bench, turned up on the state payroll today as an auditor in the Department of Finance. He will cease to be an employee of the taxpayers as soon as Director George B. McKibben can get rid of him, which will be tomorrow. McKibben found the ex-judge listed as a railroad rate auditor in the force which examines the books of the Illinois Central Railroad under a charter provision obligating the line to pay a small percentage of its receipts to the state. 7 accused bootleggers were held to the federal grand jury in total bonds of $19,500 yesterday after a hearing before the United States Commissioner Edwin K. Walker. Federal agents say they are members of an outfit which distills untaxed alcohol in Chicago, trucks it to Detroit, and smuggles it into Canada, reaping fabulous profits. Those held are Eli Frank, 4943 Quincy Street, who already is under indictment for violations of the alcohol tax law, Louis Lavender, 4908 North Drake Avenue, Jack Soroka, 3228 Adams Street, Harry Siegel, 1428 South Ridgeway Avenue, Milton, Gladstone 4707 North Sawyer Avenue, William York and Harry Anderson, both of 3714 Lake Park Avenue. At the time of their arrest, January 17th, alcohol tax agents confiscated a 2,000-gallon still, 25,000 pounds of sugar, 2 trucks, and a quantity of alcohol. The still was in a house at 4421 LaSalle Street. The Chicago Crime Commission and Judge John Prestowski of the criminal court disagreed yesterday on the wisdom of leniency once shown by the judge to 2 young robbers. The same men shot and critically wounded a patron of the Players Club at 75 West Randolph Street during a holdup early Wednesday. A bulletin of the Crime Commission quoted police records to show that the gunmen who were captured as they fled from the club committed armed robberies in 1939 and served sentences in Bridewell after robbery charges had been changed to petty larceny. The bulletin added that had the seriousness of the crimes committed by the 2 men been given the proper consideration, the youths would have been sentenced to the penitentiary, society would have been properly protected, and a citizen would not be lying at the verge of death in a hospital. These youths were first offenders when they came before me, said Judge Prestowski. I try to do right in all cases. If I made a mistake in this one, I just made a mistake. The robbers are Robert Trent, 20 years, 630 West 55th Street, a bridegroom of 2 weeks, and Thomas Hetherington, age 23, of 3403 Hirsch Street. Their victim is John Meyer, brick salesman from Ladue, Missouri, who is in the Henrotin Hospital. Judge Prestowski said that the Reverend Thomas Pander, 4616 Drexel Boulevard, who was the complainant against Trent, recommended leniency. In the case of Hetherington, the judge said his mother, who was a deeply religious and a minister, had requested clemency. The Reverend, Mr. Pender, said last night that he had not presumed to advise Judge Prestowski in the matter of leniency for Trent, but I was not averse to leniency if the judge saw fit, the minister said. The young criminals confessed after their arrest Wednesday that they had committed 2 other holdups in which they took $400 on January 10th. They named Mike Batato, 6103 Evans Avenue, an indicted bootlegger, as the man who supplied them with pistols. The earlier records show that Trent and Robert Hickey took $26 and the car of Reverend Mr. Pander, pastor of St. James Methodist Church, on October 13, 1939, and that Judge Prestowski sentenced them to the Bridewell for 6 months on the amended charge. Heatherton was charged in December 1939 with holding up several chain stores. On one charge of robbery reduced to petty larceny, he got a year in the Bridewell. On 2 others, similarly reduced, he was sentenced to 10 months. All the sentences were concurrent, and the prisoner was released at the end of a year. Mrs. Pauline Roberts, 32 years old, was beaten severely and knocked to the sidewalk last night as she resisted 3 men who took her purse containing $1.50 as she was walking in front of 15 South Racine Avenue. She was taken to the county hospital. Mrs. Roberts lives at 2642 Cortez Street. 2 visitors to Chicago got an unexpected thrill yesterday when the sightseeing plane in which they were riding made a forced landing in the parking lot south of Soldiers Field in Grant Park. The sightseers were the Reverend Leonard Darby and his wife of Seattle, Washington, who are staying at 3208 Sheffield Avenue. The landing was made without mishap by Pierce O'Carroll, 37 years old, pilot and owner of the Monarch Air Service, 6054 South Cicero Avenue. He said the gas line of his plane apparently became plugged and that he landed in the parking lot rather than attempt to reach Chicago Airport. Park District policemen grounded the plane pending permission of the Civil Aeronautics Bureau for its removal. Mrs. Mary Braza, 52 years old, 1526 Clinton Avenue, Berwyn, was injured seriously last night when she leaped or fell to the street from the platform of the Kedzie Avenue station of the Douglas Park Elevated line. She was taken to St. Anthony's Hospital. Springfield, Illinois, January 30th. The State Department of Public Health reported today that its diagnostic laboratories performed 661,673 tests for communicable diseases during 1940. Of these, 421,385 were for syphilis. Advancing years and high taxes are sending what is termed the Lube-Soldis office building into the wrecker's hands. The 11-story, 56-year-old 332 South LaSalle Street building, which cost more than $1 million, is to be razed and replaced with a one-story taxpayer to contain a garage and stores. Completion is set for late in the year. Erected in 1885 from plans by the late Daniel H. Burnham, the 332 building then contained 9 stories and was called the Rialto Building. It was connected by bridge with the old Board of Trade building across a private court. It fronted 442 feet on both LaSalle and Sherman Streets and 175 feet on Van Buren Street. The South Side's little old-fashioned lady whose grandfather fought in the Revolutionary War under George Washington tomorrow will celebrate her 110th birthday with the help of her numerous descendants, including 2 great-great-great-grandchildren. Mrs. Sarah Jane Swanson is her name, and she lives at 9855 Exchange Avenue with her son-in-law and daughter, Mr. and Mrs. John Scholzman. Mrs. Swanson likes to knit, reads without glasses, and enjoys the radio. She mothered 11 children, 6 of whom are living. And in sports, New York, January 30th. Joe Louis tomorrow night will make the 13th defense of the World Heavyweight Championship he won in 1937 from James J. Braddock in Chicago. In his second title bout in less than 7 weeks, he is to battle Clarence Red Berman of Baltimore, Maryland. The fight is scheduled for 15 rounds and is expected to attract more than 15,000 to Madison Square Garden. Promoter Mike Jacobs, who has staged every Louis bout practically from the time the Brown Bomber left the Golden Gloves ranks, predicted that, with good weather, the gate receipts will exceed $65,000. The bout will start at 9 p.m. Chicago time or as soon thereafter, as the preliminary card of 3 6-round bouts and 3 4-round events will allow. The main bout will be broadcast. Louis and Berman will weigh in tomorrow noon at the offices of the State Athletic Commission. Louis will motor here from his Greenwood Lake, New York camp for this ceremony. Berman arrived unexpectedly from Summit, New Jersey today. He came in early to see a movie. There has been almost no betting on the outcome. Prices quoted today held Louis favorite at 1-10 with odds of 1-2, 1-3, or 1-4 on a knockout in 5, 10, or 15 rounds. Berman has shown no form that would accord him more than the customary outside chance against Louis. New York, January 30th. Promoter Mike Jacobs today announced a heavyweight fight between Tony Galento and Buddy Bear, Max's brother, to be held March 26th in Madison Square Garden. The bout would be at 10 rounds. New York, January 30th. Chicago's touring Blackhawks, who in recent weeks had begun a dream of league titles and Stanley Cups, suffered their second rude shock in 3 nights in Madison Square Garden tonight when the rebuilt Americans humbled them 5-4 in a National Hockey League game. The Chicagoans were beaten in Boston Tuesday 3-2. Tonight's triumph was the first the Americans have scored in 1941, their last previous victory having been scored over the Montreal Canadiens in the Garden on New Year's Eve. The New York hero was goalie Charlie Rayner, who was making his Major League debut after having been recalled from Springfield, Massachusetts. Although the 4 goals scored against him by the Hawks hardly were indicative of airtight defensive play, he was on the job late in the game when the Hawks threatened to score. Chicago was quite willing to believe after the match that it never will be able to beat the Americans on their home ice again. Dogged by one of the strangest jinxes in Major League sports, the Hawks have been unable to win from the Americans in the Garden in 4 years, although they have had 15 opportunities to turn the trick. The Hawks will complete their current tour with a game against the Maple Leafs in Toronto Saturday night. The following evening, the same teams will clash in Chicago Stadium. Both the Hawks and Americans were shorthanded tonight. Bill Karst of the Chicagoans suffered a deep skate cut in his left leg in a collision with Pat Egan in the first period and was taken to a hospital for treatment, while the Americans' Charlie Conacher went to the same institution for treatment of an ear ailment. Although manager Red Dutton introduced two new men besides Rayner and in forwards Chuck Corrigan and Pete Kelly, the victory largely was the work of veterans. Lauren Carr scored two New York goals, and Harvey Jackson and Tommy Anderson accounted for one apiece. The fifth goal, however, was scored by rookie Pete Slobodian, who connected from 30 feet out. Young Johnny Chad got 2 goals and an assist to lead the Hawks, Bill Toms and Doug Bentley shooting the other 2. The Hawks threatened repeatedly to tie it up in the last 10 minutes when goalie Sam Lepresti was taken out of the nets to help in the attack, but the Americans' defense held. The Americans led 2-1 at the end of the first period and 4-2 at the end of the second. Toronto, Ontario, January 30th. Sweeney Schreiner's 17th goal of the season, scored within the last 3 minutes of the third period, brought the first-place Toronto Maple Leafs a 2-1 victory over the Detroit Red Wings tonight and ran their National Hockey League lead to 6 points over the idle Boston Bruins. The Leafs had come from behind to earn their 5th game without a loss. Sid Howe put Detroit in the lead in the first period when he fired a shot that caromed into the net off goalie Turk Broda's skate. Johnny Mowers held the Leafs at bay until well in the second period when Red Heron tied the score on a play with Nick Metz, and Schreiner finally broke the deadlock by working in close on Mowers after taking a pass from Don Metz. A crowd of 11,921 saw Johnny Orlando, a Husky Red Wing defenseman, draw a major penalty for fighting with Wally Stanowski, then get a misconduct penalty added for arguing with referee King Clancy. Orlando tried to resume the scrap in the penalty box, and peace was not restored until a policeman was placed on guard between the two. Broda improved his position in the goalies' race for the Vezina Trophy. The Leaf netminder now has a record of 58 goals scored on him in 31 games to Mowers' 62 and 32. The Loyola basketball team squared accounts for last year's defeat by beating the University of Chicago 47-27 last night in the Midway Fieldhouse. After 7 minutes of play, Loyola asserted its superiority and had no difficulty in maintaining a comfortable advantage thereafter. Jack Juan and Jack Stanton, 2 sophomores who were playing their first game since becoming eligible at the start of the second semester, demonstrated that they will be strong factors on the Loyola squad during the remainder of the season. Juan, a former Senn High School player, made 3 baskets and a free throw, while Stanton, a graduate of St. George, was tossing in 2 baskets and 2 free throws. Both are forwards. George Wenskis, Loyola captain, led the individual scoring with 4 baskets and 3 free throws for 11 points. Sheboygan, Wisconsin, January 30th. The Redskins defeated the Chicago Bruins 31-28 tonight in a rough basketball game. The victory gave Sheboygan 3rd place in the National Basketball League and dropped Chicago to 4th. Sheboygan built up an 18-9 lead at the half and maintained a 25-15 margin at the end of the third quarter. Bill Happick then sank 4 baskets in rapid order. 2 free throws by Quabius and baskets by Lautenschlager and Hessick kept Sheboygan in front. Mike Novak's push shot for the Bruins ended the game. Sheboygan made 13 of 16 free throws. Quabius made all of his 6 shots. Happick was a high scorer of both teams with 14 points. San Pedro, California, January 30th. Basketball player Nick Bozulich scored every one of his team's points last night as the Dazan Quintet defeated the Naval Officers Club 84-31. He plays center. Phoenix, Arizona, January 30th. A field of 150 professionals and amateurs, including 7 former holders of the title, tomorrow will begin a 3-day 72-hole battle over the springy turf of the Phoenix Country Club for the championship of the 41st Western Open Tournament, second oldest major event in American golf. This collection of swingers is in agreement on one topic, that of crossing fingers against the weatherman. They are using interlocking and overlapping grips and a few special varieties and striving to retain the grandest spell of weather they have found since December. They have encountered rain, and more of the same in the 4 tournaments they have played since the first of the year. The White Sox Fat Man's Club, a most exclusive organization sponsored with good reason by manager James Dykes, held its first formal meeting yesterday despite absence of one of the 3 hand-picked members. The session was held most appropriately on a butcher scale, the business at hand being to determine just how strenuously the 2 members, Eddie Lefty Smith and Julius Solters, must perform during their impending boiling out course in Hot Springs, Arkansas, under the watchful eye of policeman Mule Haas. Taft Wright, the 3rd member of Haas's chain gang, who, when last seen, wasn't quite as roly-poly as the 2 others, will join them at the resort today, but the work and sweat order will not be enforced until tomorrow. When both Smitty and Solters hopped aboard, the Nito proceeded to a point in the neighborhood of 430 pounds for their combined weight, a figure which proved the 2 athletes hadn't fibbed much. Smitty had declared himself a sylph-like 205 pounds. He had overcooked 7 other pounds detected by the scale. Solters ran the needle to 217 pounds, just a bit more than he thought he was. Each will aim at 200 pounds. Policeman Haas, fearing what he'll hear later from his boss Dykes if the pre-training trip course doesn't erase a reasonable amount of heft, has the Fat Man's Club daily program outlined to the last detail. They'll be turned out at 8 o'clock in the morning for breakfast and at 10 be started over the hills. Hiking will be increased daily until it covers 3 hours and in excess of 10 miles. Then the weary fellows will return for their steam baths. In the evening, the mule will read them detective stories, although there will be nights when Smitty will be permitted to bowl. He did a lot of bowling this winter and thinks it helped him to escape from about 10 additional pounds. The Fat Men will conclude their convention February 20th and proceed to Pasadena, California training camp, arriving there on February 22nd, 1 day ahead of the scheduled opening of Professor Dykes' spring school. If the fat lads aren't streamlined by that time, Dykes will order the running and walking program resumed. And if they are streamlined, they'll still have to run and walk in order to stay that way. The sudden silence thrown about the Cubs contract situation remains in effect. 17 of 37 are reported unsigned. All except a few of the 17 haven't even taken the trouble to notify the front office they are somewhat upset by the club's economy wave. But General Manager Jim Gallagher professes to be at peace with the world for the time being. However, after returning from next week's National League scheduled meeting in New York, he may feel the urge to ask some of the boys to explain their silence. John Jocko Conlon, latest of a number of Chicagoans in Major League umpiring ranks, will start the 1941 season in the National League knowing he has a lot of friends. Friends of the former White Sox player report more than 500 tickets have been sold to the Conlon testimonial dinner to be held in the Terrace Gardens of the Morrison Hotel at 6:30 p.m. February 18th. The dinner is both for men and women. This is Henry Chop reporting, and that is sports, and that is the news for Friday, January 31st, 1941. Have a swell day.